So yes, on that note, let me start with this show on Your Money Matters with my tips of the week. Yes, my tips of the week is always a special one because it gives you a glimpse of what you can do to either to prepare or to either to organize. But in the end, it's always for your benefit. So this time, my tips is about saving or protecting your children when that will help them to develop their skills. So when it comes to helping your children to develop your skills, what things can you do? Now, I want you to take away 5 things. So, when it comes to 5 things, it would be 5 tips. So, first, don't offer free lunch. Now, you realize the reason you don't offer them free lunch is because you develop skills, because kids learn about many things. One thing you need to do is set expectations. In other words, you say, if you do this, you'll get that. So if you teach them this, you realize that they learn to focus. They know how to receive things without automatically expecting them to receive. Now, the other thing also it helps to do when you don't offer them free lunch is it allows them to focus on different tasks. So give them tasks to do. So if you say, for example, okay, you'll get this if you do that, and you show them that they'll be getting something once they've finished their task, this will help them to see that they won't get things for free, but it's more of a reward. And so it's more about a reward culture that we're thinking about. So that's the first tip, is don't offer free lunch. Now the second one is offer spending guidance. So what does offering spending guidance mean? It's basically teaching your kids the importance of spending money carefully. Because if you teach them earlier on, you realize that when they get older, it's much easier for them to learn about money and managing about money. And also, split funds into categories. So, for example, let's say when we're talking about money, is the money for food? Is the money for travel? Is the money for clothing? So when you divide types of money, you realize that kids understand why they're getting money for. Or is it for travel? Is it for holiday? So, or pocket money to buy sweets. So at least they'll know that money is not just simply for any purpose, but it's really for a specific purpose. So another tip would be is to create a simple budget. Again, budget, when you say, is kind of really is teaching them how to, when they get money, how to manage their money. So don't make it too complicated. It's really is for them to kind of acknowledge why they're receiving it, also slightly also planning it, and that helps them to create a simple budget, and and also help them to learn skills. And when I say skills, I mean help them to learn skills like how to negotiate. For example, okay, with if you get this shirt, don't expect to pay £2. Ask them to negotiate to bring it down to £1. So they learn how to, I suppose, develop their skills that will be beneficial for them in the long term. And also, it's a good way to finding a compromise, i.e., it's never is free on a plate, but also, there are ways that you should think about, okay, let's maneuver. So again, it helps them. My final tip, though, is always give them compliments. So never ever, have a go at them, because having a go, it makes them frightened. Instead, when you give them, when they do things, let's say something positive, make sure you pat them on the back, saying, well done. You deserve something good, even money, because you finished a task. So a constant reminder that anything good you do, the reward will be better. So on that note, I will finish my first tips of the week, which is about ways and how and when to teach kids about money and finances. Yes, so we talked about finances. Now we'll be talking about our one of the bigger subjects. If you want to join in, call us 0207 791 5170. It is going to be a big one, and I suspect you are a renter, or you may have a view on renting, and you want to talk about your renting experience. If you want to do that, I'll be glad to hear from you anyway, because it'll be interesting to see what's going on. Have you been impacted by high rent in London, for example? Are you in rent arrears, for example? Do you think your salary isn't paying enough? If you are all those things, I want to hear from you. 0207 791 5170. 0207 791 5170. So, yes, so speaking of renting, there are a couple of things I want to focus on. It's really primarily is to kind of inform you, teach you what responsibilities and burdens you get when you become a tenant, and what do you expect being a tenant, both from the landlord and what does landlord expect from you, of course in the context of your money as well as many other things. And then I'll be looking at ways, just like my tips of the week are focused on children and helping them to manage money. And you won't believe it, from my experience, my personal experience, I find that a lot of adults, when they're having difficult times, they may forget the opportunity to manage with money and also looking after their money for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes you're to blame, sometimes you're not. It all depends. There's no one size fits all. So I want to talk about all those things, and I want you to also take part and you to share your experiences and views, and I want to know all about it. So, but let's move on to my topic on your legal and financial responsibilities when you are renting. Yes, renting. I'm afraid when you're renting, it's never easy, especially when it comes to in London. We all know the price of living in London, it's just eye-watering. It is horrible for some, and I come across so many people who say, why on earth am I living in this part of London? And as time goes on, I just can't cope. In fact, if anything goes wrong, if my landlord throws me out of my room, I will never be able to come back to the part of London I'm living, because it's just getting expensive as time goes on. And do you know what? You have all my sympathy. It is not easy. It is for some people. Forget about mortgage. Getting a mortgage is impossible in central London, but renting is also getting more difficult, especially when the price of renting is going up. So in that context, obviously I'm thinking, okay, how can you learn about your rights when it comes to being a tenant? Of course, I'll be going through a number of things, and I want to do that because I want you to learn. I want you to take away feelings that, okay, there are something that I can use when I'm finding myself in difficult times. So first thing, really, what I want to talk about is really more about your renting agreement and what does it mean. Also, what does it mean if you are, let's say, a joint tenant or a sole tenant, and how does that vary, and what burden does that put on you if you're one, or are you a guarantor, and what does guarantor mean? And I want to talk to you about it. I want to hear from you too if you want to take part. 0207 791 5170. 0207 791 5170. Yes. So, yeah, the question is, how do you read your tenancy agreement carefully? Now, before you sign a tenancy agreement, do make sure you read, obviously, the tenancy agreement. But don't ignore the small print. And I think a lot of people who suffer from ADHD, and I think, although my doctor said I don't, I still think I do, because my concentration level isn't that great, and I accept that. If you are, then obviously you might find that you are in the same position as me. But the issue is, there's no a way for you to avoid the small print, because small print is where you get the detailed obligation set, and the reality is not people like to read the small print. So because what your agreement and the small print will do is actually tell you your obligations, i.e., what you must perform as part of the contract of tenancy. So it will explain to you whether you should be looking after the garden, and to keep it tidy. So it's your job. If not, obviously it will be job of the landlord or lender's agent. But you'll only know once you read the small print. It may also explain whether you need to take out a contents insurance. Now, obviously, content insurance is basically a policy whereby if your things in the property are damaged, the contents insurance should be covering to protect you, so you can claim off your insurance company if, let's say, sofa is ruined, or if beds or tables are ruined. And also, don't forget also to read the contents insurance policy carefully, because it needs to fit your specific purpose. And the other thing you need to bear in mind is that when it comes to a TV license, who pays it? Do you pay? Also, or does the landlord pay? So you need to find out exactly who is going to be paying the TV license. Otherwise, you might find that TV license authority knocking on your door, TV is there, but who's going to pay? You can't say can't pay, won't pay. It just won't work. So in this case, having a discussion with the landlord, having read the blueprint or black print, and let's not forget the small print, will actually tell you. Now, the other thing is, a lot of people actually forget this, but who is responsible for council tax? Now, council tax is a big one. Because if you don't pay council tax, there could be serious repercussion. And also service charge and ground rent. So do bear in mind that those things are covered by your tenancy agreement. Now, there may be an occasion when you find that you may try to avoid paying unexpected cost now or in the future. There are a couple of things. Don't get out. 2 students ignore the council tax letters from the council, assuming the council tax is included in their rent. I'm afraid it isn't. And in that scenario, both students will be liable to pay, and the council can bring a case against you in court if you don't pay your council tax. So you can't avoid it, but you have to deal with it. But you might as well deal with it earlier on rather than later. So that's kind of in a sense of knowing your responsibility. But of course, to be more careful, just have a conversation. Best to have a conversation earlier on than later. So now, let's try moving towards you being a sole or joint tenant. Yep, sole or joint tenant. What does it mean? Do you know it? 0207 791 5170. Yep. Joint tenant and sole tenants. It may sound simple. In some way, it is simple. Other times, it's not. But let me demystify it for you. So basically, if you share a property with others, it's important to establish whether a joint or not, or whether you live by yourself, or anyone living with you are effectively your guest, and thus is your responsibility. So If you are a joint tenant, here's what goes on. Two or more of you will be listed on the tenancy agreement. So basically, to find out whether you are a joint tenant, you have to go and read the tenancy agreement. And all of those are named on the agreement are liable. Again, speaking of your responsibility, are liable to pay the rent and meet all the obligations. Yes, let me just repeat, all the obligations to the landlords laid out in the tenancy agreement. And let's say, for example, and it usually happens, let's be frank, I've done it as well, and you may have done it too, 0207 791 5170. If one of you moves out, it easily happens. You've decided to go your own way. Your friend has got a job, decided to get a bigger house, bigger flat, bigger room, and you probably like where you're living, but there is spare room. But of course, there are problems. If one of you moves out, that person is still, that's you by the way, if you're still living in the property, or even that person, liable to pay the share of the rent until the tenancy agreement is altered. Now, let me kind of repeat this. This is important for your benefit that I do repeat this. So basically, even if the person moves out, that person is still liable to pay. And even if you stay, you are also liable to pay. It's simple. The reason being, both of you signed it, both of you accepted what you've signed with the landlord, so therefore you have to pay unless the agreement has changed. So in other words, unless the landlord or landlord's agent has accepted the change and then they have brought a new document which shows that it has changed, then your friend or you are free from the joint tenancy. Otherwise, I'm afraid you are, and this is the buzzword, I'm going to repeat it again. Yep, the buzzword is called joint and several liability. This applies to council tax issues, but also applies to tenancy. If you're living there together, you're jointly and severally liable, and there is no way of escaping unless you've altered the tenancy. So that's obviously if you are living by yourself. But you're not always living by yourself. You might be living, you're not always living with others. You might be living by yourself. If you are, I want to hear from you. 0207 791 5170. If you are obviously sole tenant, living by yourself, your own flat, own room, own kitchen, own sink, own DVD player, own space, and own toilet, yes, it's all yours and no one else's, that's sole tenant. So you are the only person who's got the agreement and the tenancy agreement, I mean. You alone are liable to pay the entire rent and bills, unless, of course, the agreement says otherwise. If you currently share the rent and bills with a partner or a housemate and they move out, you will have to pay all those costs yourself. So clearly, the burden falls on you to pay. Your partner, your housemates have no legal right to occupy the property. If your arrangement or relationship breaks down, they will need to find other accommodation. But you do, because you've signed the agreement with the landlord to pay and to comply with the agreement of the tenancy. But there is another one, obviously. The other one is rent guarantor. Yes, rent guarantor. It may sound complicated, or maybe you have come across it yourself. 0207 791 5170. Rent guarantor. Let's say, for example, you yourself are young, unemployed, studying, or renting for the first time. Or maybe you're doing all those things for someone else. In other words, landlord might consider you or someone else risky than other tenants. So in other words, it is about risks. If the landlord or landlord's agent think you are risky, then they might say something like, we would like a guarantor, or someone should act as a guarantor So that's partly why they say it, to make sure they get their money if you don't pay. So if you don't pay, there are ways to recover it, and if you don't pay, it will be done through guarantor. So in other words, another party who enters into the tenancy agreement with you and the landlord to say, if the person doesn't pay, we will recover from the guarantor. So that's why when a guarantor comes forward, the guarantor has to be sensible, hopefully just like you, and ideally rich, who can afford to pay you and the tenancy. So yeah, think about it. So, and the guarantor also has to be an adult, I'm afraid. It can't be a child. So yeah, so that's kind of, in a sense, what guarantor is. A person who takes on the burden if you default in paying. So the guarantor will pay on your behalf and can also be taken to court if you don't pay, because the tenancy agreement allows it to happen. So that's kind of, in a sense, on a nutshell, of your responsibilities and your legal obligations as a renter. But of course, there are other things you could do. Let's be frank about it. Let's talk about briefly about, budgeting and sharing cost. Sharing cost. So it is important that you do share cost. And why is it important? It's simple, really. It's all about being organized about your money and your property. Missed payments or don't pay your bills on time, you can get a bad rating. Think about it. I know you think you're a fantastic money manager, but the reality is, if you end up not paying, it affects other things. I know many times I've talked about credit reference agencies, and if you don't pay, it could be registered on your credit rating. So this could have a negative impact on you. So you need to think about that. You might even have problems where you'll have borrowing in the future. Do you want that? So there we are. I mean, also with certain things, let's say, for example, if you don't pay your bills, or, for example, heat, phone, they might get cut off. So that could cause a problem for you. Do you want that? And let's not forget, council tax, TV license. They will take you to court. And the magistrate, in extreme scenarios, could put you in prison. Now, do you want that? I really doubt you do. So, things that you need to bear in mind, and let's go through it. Yes, let's go through it. Council tax, gas, electricity bills, water bills, TV license. If you're living by yourself, that is, content insurance, if needed by the landlord. And don't forget your landline phone bill. Now, I know that these days, because of mobile, not many people actually use their landline. Maybe that's not necessary. But again, talk to your landlord. That could be cleared rather than worrying about it. So yeah, and also write down all your share bills if you're living together. It's best to be organized and plan your money. So in the future, at least, there'll be less problems for you. And last thing I want, and I suspect you want, is to be debt-free and at the same time have lots of money in your bank account. And I'm all up for you having lots of money in your bank account rather than having less money and stressed about no money at all, because I am on your side. If you want to talk, 0207 791 5170. So there we are. So in terms of your paying options when it comes to bills, and I'm sure you know about it. Now, if you pay direct debit, all creditors, fuel companies, phone bill companies, they give you a discount. You will always get a discount. So if you're trying to save money, best option, believe it or not, is actually you paying direct debit. Because the moment you do that, you actually get a better deal. But there are other options available. If you're living with a friend, talk to your friend and and say, we know direct debit is cheaper, standing order is cheaper, but if it's paying your bills in the post office, then so long you can budget yourself, it's fine. But I'm just here to let you know there are ways you can budget your money. Now, there are times when you will be struggling, no doubt, and I always come across individuals who are struggling. And let's be frank, I'm a debt advisor. That's my job. I do with money, and especially when there is none of it. And in that scenario, what do? Of course, you seek advice, you seek support, and no doubt you are highly stressed. And the last thing I want is for you not to manage your problems. I want you to manage your problems before it arises. I also want you to do well in life to make sure you are debt free and very, very prosperous indeed. But it helps when you know your rights. Rights as a tenant, rights when it comes to what you must prepare for, rights when it comes to your obligations under the tenancy agreement, and all the bills, yes, all the bills you must pay as part of you being an independent tenant, either as a joint tenant or as a sole tenant with a guarantor. Then obviously you are sorted. But things do go wrong. If that happens, please do not wait till the end, but try seeking support. So yes, on this part of the show, you have learned a lot. But no doubt things do go wrong. If that's the case, do contact your local Citizen Advice Bureau, or you might Google online and see things like National Debt Advice Line to obtain advice for your money, and they will no doubt talk to you about your rent, because obviously that's what we are talking about, is how to be a renter and your right as a renter, and any problems you might get as a result of you renting but not paying your bills. Things do happen: council tax, fuel bills, and phone bills, and so many other things. So on that note, let me take a brief break, and we will be talking about another serious topic. And if you want to join in, 0207 791 5170, and we'll talk about your when you lose your job and the benefits and tax credit that you might be entitled to, and of course my another tips of the week.